Nothing like bacon in the morning to get things started, huh? Hola y'all, it's your girl Shelly Flowers, aka Michelle Flores, and today I wanted to do a different kind of tag because aside from being an avid reader, I am also a writer, specifically a poet, and starting in September of this year, I will also be a picture book author. So I figured I'm making breakfast, I got no makeup on, might as well have you guys come hang out with me and we can talk about me and my writing process this morning. So let's get started. I did go ahead and decide to make my own version of this tag because there were some questions from the original tag that I really liked and some questions from the new tag that I really like. So I kind of just combined those two questions together. Jenna Streety made the original tag, so I'm going to link her down below. Let's do this. So the first question is, how did you find out about AuthorTube? And the way that I found out about AuthorTube was very typical, I think, for most people. I started off with BookTube, and then I noticed I was getting suggested links to videos of people who are already on AuthorTube. Alexa Dunn in particular, I'm linking her channel down below as well. I think she's phenomenal, and the level of research that she puts into her writing is just really, really excellent. Like, to the point where I feel like she's giving out information that I learned in my MFA, except she's doing it for free, whereas my MFA cost me $41,000. So that's something to think about if you're planning on getting an MFA. She is traditionally published, and that's the path that I am on as well. And I also noticed that she tends to focus a lot on YA publishing, and I don't really write YA. So I think for me, I appreciate the content that her videos have. I just know that not all of it is always applicable to the things that I'm trying to do. So that kind of leads into my next question. What is your goal? Also, I have a cafetera. The handle broke. So annoying. But I love this thing. Like, I'm Cuban coffee. You need a cafetera. And I also keep all Café Bustelo in here. And so anyway, Cuban coffee. Get yourself a cafetera, get some Café Bustelo or any other like Latin coffee, Café La Llave, Café Pilon. That's where it's at. So my goal for starting this AuthorTube channel. Now, as I was kind of saying before, Alexa Dunn is an excellent resource, and I highly recommend her to anyone who's trying to break into the traditionally published field, but her focus is primarily young adult fiction, and I write poetry and picture books as of right now. I'm also working on a YA novel, but that's another side project that is very much in its infancy. So I think for my channel, I don't see as many resources for people who are working on picture books and poetry. The poetry resources that I do see tend to be from people who are self-publishing poetry. So I just wanted to give a glimpse on what it's like to be a traditionally published poet. That is an incredibly difficult field to break into. However, it is getting easier because poetry is becoming more popular within the like zeitgeist. Also want this channel to be a way for me to document my journey as a writer. Like I've said in previous videos, my first book came out last year. It's a chapbook of poetry. Traditionally, you usually get like 1 or 2 chapbooks before you finally get a full-length collection. And so I really want to document this process because I feel like my career is starting to like get the ball rolling, and I just think it would be nice to have this collection of videos of my thoughts and my process as I've gone along over the years. So the next question is, what's your book's pitch? Now, this is an interesting question because I have a few books going right now, but I'm going to focus on the picture book that's coming out later this year. And I would say that that book's pitch is, it's a Halloween story. So it's about a little bat and his family who go out trick-or-treating, and they decide to meet new friends along the way, but maybe even a few fiends. Also, my oven is ready now, so that's great timing. Yeah, it's just a cute little story, and I hope people like it. I am also working with a local illustrator. She's also Latina, she's Boricua. So it's really nice to like make this a very collaborative project. That's something I will say about picture books versus poetry books. I feel like picture books are just so collaborative, particularly if you have a partner who's the illustrator or the writer. So if that's something you guys are interested in hearing about, the process of putting together a picture book, let me know. because to me it's just very different than anything I've ever done before. The next question is, what authors inspire you the most, including your writing? So the first author that just inspires me in terms of her career is Elizabeth Acevedo. This is an Elizabeth Acevedo Stan channel. I just think like her career trajectory is so close to how I want mine to look. And I know that that can be a dangerous line because you don't want to emulate, you know, beat for beat what someone else has done with their career. But when I say that, what I mean is she started off as a spoken word poet in her teen years. Then she went to college and like became a national slam champion. Then she got her MFA. Then she was in the classroom for a few years. She was actually an English teacher, a middle school English teacher. And then she won a chapbook contest, which is like the one that she won is like a very famous chapbook contest. It's like one of the more difficult ones to win. So her chapbook, Beast Girl and Origin Myths, is excellent. It's really difficult to find now because chapbooks usually sell out pretty quickly. They don't make, the press run isn't as large for a chapbook. But if you can ever find it, I highly suggest you get it. And then, you know, she had these 3 manuscripts that she'd been working on while she was teaching, and decided, you know, talked about it with her husband, and one day she decided, okay, I'm gonna stop working so I can focus on this writing, and it paid off. And I just find that to be so inspirational because there's so many things in that path that are very similar to me. I myself am not a spoken word poet. I think I'm a much more of a traditional poet in that sense, but performance has become a much bigger part of my career, and I've seen how much it can impact my work and how positively it can impact my work. So that's just something I think about, is like, how can I get to the point where I am focusing on the thing that I love? I think for so long I've been focusing on teaching because it's safe, it's secure. I'm always gonna have a job as a teacher. At the same time, it's not my deepest desire, it's not my deepest passion. So I need to take the risk of putting faith in myself and believing that I can make my dream of being a writer work in a way that I just haven't done before. The other poet who I would say is most influential on my writing is probably Danez Smith. They are arguably, and I don't even know that this is arguable, I think this is just a fact at this point, they are arguably the most talented poet of our generation. I just bought their new book, Homie. I cannot wait to read it. I think I'm gonna save it for LGBTQ-a-thon or for Pride Month, because Danez is a non-binary person. They are also HIV positive, and being a Black queer pos person, I think they have so much to contribute to conversations about intersectionality and diversity, but also their writing is just so fucking good. I'm linking some of my favorite videos of theirs down below, because I think they are one of those writers, similarly to Elizabeth Acevedo, that crosses that line between traditional writing and spoken word. For like the longest time in the poetry community, it's like you had to be one or the other. Either you were a slam poet who was just so bombastic in their approach to performance, or you were a traditionally published poet who was like the most boring thing, and yet you had this beautiful imagery within your work that just transcended the page, whereas slam poets tended to be really personal and confessional, but there wasn't anything that was like meatier to it other than the personal experiences that were being conveyed. So I think both of these poets represent a new generation of poets who do both, who have really performative elements within their work, but can also write the shit out of a metaphor. So, you know, that those two are in my head as I work on some of these projects that I'm working on right now. The next question, what do you usually write? And that's simple. I usually write poetry, although I am working on a few picture books, and I have one novel that I am going to, I'm saying this now because I want it to be known, and I'm going to manifest it. I'm saying I'm going to finish this novel this summer. I've got 6 weeks off in the summer for sure, possibly 8, depending on whether or not we can go on our honeymoon, which is kind of sad because I was so looking forward to that, but it is what it is. And with that, I want to get, I think, at least 80,000 words done. The idea of writing 80,000 words is freaking me out, because I think the longest manuscript I've ever written has been like, no, not 1,000 words, probably like 4,000 or 5,000. I should check my poetry manuscript and see how long it actually is, my full-length collection, which hasn't been published anywhere yet, so I gotta look into that. Okay, so the next question is, do you schedule your writing sessions, or do you write whenever you can? And my answer to that is a little bit of both. So every week I create a schedule for myself, and in that schedule I make time for things like writing and reading, because I work full-time and I have 2 kids. So if I don't write it down, it's not going to happen. And I've just noticed over the years I need to make time for that stuff because it makes me happy. So I put it on my schedule, but I also recognize that things happen day to day, and sometimes, even though I want to write, it doesn't happen. I don't give myself a specific time to write, because there are times where I wake up in the morning and I'm just like not inspired at all. There are times where it's like 2 in the morning, and that's when I'm like, I need to write, I need to do something. So for me, as long as I just put it on my agenda for the day, then it usually does get done. But I usually aim for about 4 times a week that I write at least for 30 minutes, or write a poem that I can later go back and edit. Next question, what made you want to start writing? I just started. I think like most people who are writers, I've been writing since I was a child. I have all of these bins of journals in my dad's house, and some of them were filled with typical like diary stuff. Other ones I filled with poems and stories, and I've just been writing my entire life. My toast is ready. You know, it's interesting because I feel like I've been trying to fight my writing career my entire life. I feel like I've been focusing so much on that security I was talking about before that I didn't take the time to really invest in myself. And a few things have happened to me over the past few months and really couple years that have made me realize like security is definitely an illusion, and if this is something that's going to make me happy, then it's worth pursuing. The next question is, what's your publishing path? So my publishing path is definitely traditional publishing. My first chapbook is available through Finishing Line Press. My picture book is available through Atmosphere Press. Those are 2 independent publishers. But to be honest, even my dream publisher is an independent publisher. So I don't have a dream to work with like a big 5 or anything like that. Grey Wolf is arguably, I think, one of the top presses in the country. I think the work that they put out is just like the most interesting work, especially when it comes to poetry. They started off as a poetry publisher. Danez Smith is published by them, and there are Natalie Diaz, who wrote Post-Colonial Love Poem, Leah Naomi Green, who just won the Walt Whitman Award, she's published through them. So I just feel like overall Grey Wolf is doing a really excellent job of putting together a really incredible collection of poetry books. And they also publish fiction and nonfiction. What I appreciate about them though is that their poetry can be submitted unagented. So getting an agent as a poet, you have to just have an insane amount of Instagram followers, or you have to be like, you have to have already published a book and sold a bajillion copies to get a literary agent as a poet. It's funny because the process is kind of backwards compared to fiction. Fiction, normally you don't get anything traditionally published until you get that agent. But with poetry, oftentimes your first books come out through independent publishers or because you won a writing contest. And that's the kind of stuff that I'd like to talk about, because it is different for poets than it is for fiction writers. Also, look at this mug. I think it's so cute. I was in Teach for America, and last summer I was training corps members in getting ready to be in the classroom. And at the end of the summer, a bunch of my corps members bought me gifts, and this was one of the gifts, and I just thought it was so sweet. It's one of those things where I've been thinking that it's time for me to leave the classroom and go to university as a professor. And that experience, I think, really did solidify that for me. So I'm hoping at some point I can get a job in a university and be a professor. Because I just think that that type of career is more conducive for someone who wants to write. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think I am. Okay, that's making a lot of noise, so I'm gonna pause this video, maybe get some more cooking done, and then answer some more questions. Okay, so my cafe is almost done, my leche is done, my bacon's cooking, I'm getting ready to make some eggs. So let's keep it moving. The next question is, what content do you bring to the AuthorTube table? So I personally think that I can bring the perspective of someone who has gone down a more traditionally literary path. I do have an MFA, I focus in poetry. I don't love literary fiction, but I know enough about it to understand how it works. So I think I can definitely add that perspective into my channel. I am also a bilingual author, so pretty much everything I write is in some form of Spanglish, especially my poetry. My poetry, I have some poems that are half in English. I should probably take that out. I have some poems that are half in English, half in Spanish, and I refuse to change that. I made a decision really early on, like when I was in my early 20s, that I wasn't going to italicize Spanish, and I wasn't going to you know, just apologize about using a different language in my work. And I honestly think that's what makes my work stronger. It adds a really interesting element when you can hear the two languages working together. Does it alienate some of my audience who doesn't speak Spanish? Maybe, but at the same time, now you know how we feel. I don't really know how else to describe that. Like, I think it's just one of those things where when you're a multilingual person, you want to use that as much as possible. That's my son running around. He just woke up, so I gotta get his cereal going. Okay, so the next question is, what is your biggest writing struggle? And I personally think that my biggest writing struggle is my imposter syndrome. I am so plagued by imposter syndrome. I don't know why, but I just constantly doubt myself in whatever I do. And I don't know if it's because I turned 30 a couple years ago, or if it's because I'm just slowly getting more confident in my own self, but I've just realized I gotta stop doing this to myself. I have held myself back from so many opportunities simply because I didn't believe I was ready. And then meanwhile, people who were less qualified or less good at what they were doing were getting so many opportunities. I'm not even talking about writing specifically. I am also talking about just in my education career, because I think that overall, people have just taken bigger chances on themselves than I have. And that's a lesson I've had to learn, is like, it's okay to take a chance on yourself. It's okay to leap a little bit before you feel like you might be ready, because at the end of the day, like, no one is going to be checking for you the way you're going to check for yourself. So why would you hold yourself back in that way? I haven't had anyone to guide me in my career. I'm a first-gen college student. My dad is a construction worker. My mom was a secretary. So like, and I think she got her AA, but I'm not sure. I know she like went to college, but she never fully finished a 4-year degree. So there's just so much that I am learning because I come from a more working class background, and I feel like breaking into the literary landscape when you come from a background like that can be really challenging, and you just get beat down. It just gets really hard. So that's all. I'm just hoping that I can start having a little bit more faith in myself, because I know I've got the talent and I know I've got the work ethic. I just need to make it all come together somehow. The next question, and if you hear something in the background, those are my eggs. They're finally starting to cook, so I'm excited about that. But the next question is, what is your best writing skill? And is this sugar? Yeah, that's sugar. Okay. my best writing skill, I honestly think it's my ability to take and implement feedback. I think that's a really hard thing for a lot of people, to recognize that their work isn't perfect the first time that they wrote it. I think people get really precious about the things that they write, and so they feel like if someone is critiquing them or giving them feedback, they immediately take it as something negative. And I'm not saying that all feedback isn't already negative. I just think like sometimes what you wrote isn't that good, and people just want to help you get better. So instead of fighting against that, use it to your advantage. And what I love about feedback is that these are all just suggestions. It also helps me understand how my work is being perceived. So I might think I'm doing something, but then when I get feedback, I realize like, oh, I actually wasn't successful in that thing, or I was successful in that thing, and now I know how to move on from there. So I think that's something to be mindful of if you do struggle with feedback. You really just gotta trick your brain into seeing it as, oh, this is just help. This isn't how they actually feel about my work. This isn't, you know, them judging me. It's just them trying to help. And I think once you do that, feedback becomes a lot easier. I think specifically if you want to be traditionally published, you've got to get over the hump of fearing feedback. It's just a part of life. And I think especially if you're a poet, like performing your poems in front of a crowd is a form of getting feedback. Your pieces are not always going to be polished. And in fact, if you are a poet, I think you definitely need to go to like an open mic or some kind of poetry reading to perform your work, because poetry at the end of the day is an oral tradition, and you need to see how your words are connecting with people live and in the moment. So the next one, there was in the AuthorTube 2.0 tag, there were 2 questions depending on if you're new or if you're older in AuthorTube. Obviously I'm new, my channel's only like 2 months old. But my big question is, I see so much talk about word counts on here, and it stresses me out. Like, I think it's because I'm not a fiction writer, so I don't know what all it entails, but like, there is so much obsession over word count, and I kind of want to understand the rationale behind it. I get that as a novelist, you want to make sure you've got about 80 to 100,000 words in your novel, just to make sure that it's like a complete story. But I also wonder if sometimes these seemingly arbitrary numerical goals are actually helpful to the writing process. So I don't know, that's just something I'd love to have a little bit more insight in, because I'm not a fiction writer, but I am someone who's planning on writing a novel, and my brain doesn't work that way. It doesn't think in terms of word. It thinks in terms of, did I actually accomplish the emotional goal that I had for this piece? So that's why some of my poems will be half a page and some of them will be 3 pages, because that's the only way I can gauge if it's done. Going based off word count is going to be a totally different mindset. The next question is, are you looking for any other channels to follow or any critique partners, beta readers or other types of writing buddies? And the answer is definitely yes. I have a poetry manuscript that's pretty much done. I just need to fine tune it and tweak it slightly. So I would love to have a critique partner for that. I also, like I said before, I'm working on a novel. I would love to get a critique partner and a sensitivity reader for that novel. And same thing with my picture books. I have a couple picture books that are coming out, or that I'm working on, that I would love some critique partners and sensitivity readers for those. My bacon's done! The last question is, what are you most excited for during this new fresh start on AuthorTube? I don't really know what they mean by that. I think like I've seen a few old videos, and apparently there was some drama about ARCs and whether or not they should be free. So maybe that's what they're referring to. There was just like a big chasm, I guess, in AuthorTube. I'm looking forward to staying out of that kind of drama, because that's the reason why I don't get on Twitter, because I just think like there's just a lot of foolishness that happens everywhere. Obviously ARCs are free. I don't understand why that's an issue. And I'm also looking forward to, like I said before, just getting to document my process, my journey, getting to connect with other writers, and also pushing people to let the poetry in. I saw that Kate Kavanaugh in one of her writing goal videos talked about wanting to write more poetry, and I got so excited because I think honestly, like, for so long poetry has gotten such a bad rap, and right now it's going through a renaissance. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Here's the final product. I'm draining my bacon now, but you can see it there. Very healthy breakfast. I'm clearly someone who's very concerned about cholesterol, so you're welcome. But anyway, that's it from me for today. If you'd like to follow me on a more day-to-day basis, you can find me on Instagram, Goodreads, and Tumblr at Shelly Flowers. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday. The next video that I make will be talking about getting an MFA and whether it's worth it. So if that's a topic you're interested in, let me know if you have any questions down below about an MFA and you know, some of the benefits, the drawbacks, so I can make sure I address those in my video. All right, ciao y'all.